because one thing that David Owen said that I didn't agree with was that Begin had represented Israel's interests well. I don't agree. It seems to me the criticism that Begin will have in history is that he has done exactly the wrong thing from Israel's point of view, because he's prevented any settlement that could be acceptable to Israel's neighbors.
Well, let's, Geoffrey Paul, I want to come back to this point as to whether any successor to Mr. Begin can, as it were, give away something on the West Bank, which would be acceptable to Arab opinion.
Well, I think we're looking a long way ahead, because if the next Prime Minister is to come from the ranks of the Likud, the alignment from Cherut, his party, then there is going to be no early change at all, because whereas Begin could go out and take initiatives on his own, very often dragging the party after him, the new Prime Minister, until he has won an election on a popular vote for himself, is going to be very much the prisoner of the party.
So you'd actually think
the party
that
is dedicated to retaining the territories on the West Bank.
And that any successor to him would be, in some sense, a prisoner, as you say, but weaker than Mr. Begin has been. And
well, he'll have to very much observe coalition or party discipline, and the party is not going to allow him to break what is a basic tenet of the beliefs of Cherut, which is that there has been an invisible line dividing the state of Israel from the rest of its territories. That invisible line has now been removed.
Michael Elkins there was saying that Menachem Begin had told him that it was his dearest wish that the borders of Israel should be irreversible. Now, do you think that, in fact, Menachem Begin tonight should be really very pleased? Because if what you're saying is true, there isn't the likelihood that Israel can give away any of the West Bank.
Well, there is always a possibility of some compromise. There is always that possibility.
But in the light of the settlements that are there, I mean, wouldn't you say that it's now irreversible?
It is becoming more and more irreversible as the weeks go by. It would be like taking Spaghetti Junction around Birmingham and putting back the country roads and forgetting that Spaghetti Junction was ever there. There is now a Spaghetti Junction of roads, towns, settlements. Israeli infrastructure is down on the ground. It's going to be a very difficult job indeed to just pick that up and take it away. It was all right in Sinai, in the desert, but it's much more different in a settled urban area.
Let's go on to the Lebanon now, because the situation has escalated there tonight. We're seeing the danger of civil war almost increase almost by the hour. Now, do you think that a successor to Menachem Begin can do anything which is likely to make the Lebanese situation any more stable?
I don't think the Lord himself can do anything to make the Lebanese situation stable.
But what are we to make of the fact that today, almost in his last act, he decided that the Israeli army should stay there, even if only temporarily?
Well, I think that was a personal gesture to President Reagan. I'm sure the Israeli army will not stay there very much beyond the end of next week. In fact, before the end of next week, I think they will be pulled back to the Awali River. There will then be this terrible vacuum. We're already seeing the various forces trying to fill it, with the international force getting trapped in the middle. I've seen nothing but blood and spoilage in Beirut and in Lebanon for a long, long time to come, until the people themselves say, we've had enough. We're just not going to go around killing each other anymore.
Michael Adams, do you go along with that?
Yes, about the Lebanon I do. I'm afraid I feel hopeless, rather desperate about it. I think it's in such a mess now, even with the present setup with the Israelis there. Whether it can be worse without them, I don't know. But either way, it seems to me it's gone so far down the road that it's going to be very hard ever to bring it back from chaos. But about the situation of the West Bank, which seems to me much more important fundamentally, I don't agree with Geoffrey Paul. I know it's the view most people do hold, but it seems to me with all this spaghetti junction of settlements which they've littered all over the West Bank, and incidentally so hideously ugly that's part of the tragedy, but I don't see that is irreversible. There are now, I understand, some 35,000 settlers on the West Bank, Israeli settlers. There are 750,000 Arabs. Even if they double that number of settlers next year, there will still be 750,000 Arabs, and that's going to be, for a long time, an immense majority. It's perfectly possible, I think, to envisage a political settlement, not a solution, but a settlement, which would leave some of that concrete junk that Israel's put there on the West Bank, but it would give the people living in it the choice of staying there under Arab sovereignty.
Both of you seem to be agreeing that the situation's bleak, but if very little is likely to happen that's going to change the situation over the next few months, even years, who do you think now has the initiative to exploit this situation?
I think always the Americans, because the Americans, if they care to use it, have plenty of influence to bring to bear on Israel, and it seems to me this gives them a golden opportunity. As I said, I think Begin's going means that lots of things are possible that weren't before, and one is the possibility that the Americans could actually pull themselves together and use the influence they've got and forget about having an election themselves in 6 months' time or whatever it is, but just say we have a responsibility here. We have promised many times that we respect the rights of all parties, and that does include the Palestinians, so let's get on and do something about it.
Finally, both of you, can I ask you this? Do you think that Menachem Begin has left Israel more divided or less divided than when he came in?
I think much more divided, and I think past a very dangerous turning point in its history.
Geoffrey Paul?
I think he has left parts of Israel divided from itself, but he has left behind a tremendous following, which I would never have expected him to have had after 6 years in office.
Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Gavin?
Now today's other main news stories. 4 hijackers holding an Air France Boeing 727 at Tehran airport with 16 hostages on board have threatened tonight to take off and blow the plane up over Iraq. The gunmen, armed with submachine guns and grenades, ordered the plane to be refueled and the runway was cleared. They took a male hostage from the plane at gunpoint and fired shots over his head. The aircraft is still on the tarmac at Tehran tonight, where it's been for 48 hours since it was seized on a flight from Vienna to Paris. The hijackers are reported to want France to withdraw its troops from Chad and Lebanon and halt military aid to Iraq. Police in the Philippines today named the gunman shot dead at Manila airport after the assassination of opposition leader Benigno Aquino 9 days ago. He was Roland Galman, and they described him as a notorious killer and gun for hire, sometimes used by organized crime or subversive elements. President Marcos is now said to be facing increasing opposition. 9,000 police are expected to be on standby for Aquino's funeral in Manila tomorrow, and as many as 1 million people may attend. U.S. Special Envoy to Central America Richard Stone met Salvadoran left-wing rebel leaders today in what has been described as their first substantive talks. The meeting took place in a secret location in Costa Rica and coincided with reports that the Nicaraguan government is also seeking a meeting with U.S. officials. In Chile, the governor of Santiago, retired Major General Carol Otsuo, was killed when his car was ambushed by 6 attackers. 2 of his aides also died in the attack, which took place just as their car left the governor's home. Police are still hunting the assassins. Industry's slow recovery from the recession continued last month, according to the CBI, but the prospects for further recovery next year look increasingly gloomy. The latest CBI forecast says growth next year may be only 2% instead of the 2.5% previously forecast. Even that may tail off by the end of the year.
We've always said it was modest growth. We've never expected any dramatic increase in growth, and we are still looking for 2% next year, which is worth having anyway.
But not enough to cut unemployment next year.
But unfortunately not enough to begin cutting into unemployment. We need more than 2.5%, we believe, to do that. And therefore we will, of course, be trying to impress on government the need to keep this recovery going, to speed it up insofar as we can without running risks with inflation.
A rapist whose underground hideout was discovered last week is thought to have carried out a 3rd attack, and police fear his latest victim may be dead. Clothing was found after a woman's screams were heard at a park in Bexley in Kent. More than 100 police officers searched the area but found nothing. Last week they discovered 2 military-style hideouts in the same area. And Essex police are following a new lead in the hunt for Diane Jones, the missing doctor's wife. A call from a woman claiming to be a close friend said Mrs. Jones from Coggeshall in Essex is now in Bury St Edmunds. Police also say that newspaper reports that her handbag had been found were completely inaccurate. The competition for domestic air shuttle routes became even more fierce today. British Midland Airways have applied for 2 more routes from Heathrow to Aberdeen and to Jersey. Meanwhile, British Airways launched their improved shuttle services by putting on 3 Concordes to Glasgow and back. Although there had apparently been thousands of inquiries about the Concorde flights, some seats were left empty as passengers took advantage of the chance to travel on Concorde for just £58. On board, a cooked breakfast for the passengers, another response to competition from British Midland. But BA is insisting that it's not embarking on a price war over the shuttle routes. And on that other shuttle, America's Challenger, the astronauts have been getting down to work. Among them is 54-year-old William Thornton, the oldest astronaut yet. He'll be monitoring his colleagues for space sickness. Tomorrow they'll launch an Indian communications satellite, one of the mission's main tasks, and the reason for a spectacular nighttime launch. And finally, if the healthy glow of your summer holiday has already started to fade into the daily grind of the jaundiced commuter, then you're not alone. Commuting, it seems, should carry a government health warning. An EEC report has found that London's commuters whose journeys to work take more than an hour are 39% more likely to be ill than others. London, more than any other city, has tired travellers on public transport, yet they spend less time asleep and socialise less. And the disease is known abroad. In Athens, the study says carbon monoxide fumes from traffic makes travellers depressed and have headaches. In France, women commuters are prone to giving birth prematurely, and in Finland, you're almost as likely to die on the way to work as you are when you get there. I always thought that getting there was half the fun. Ian.
Well, as you heard earlier, there's news of a Lebanese counterattack in Beirut by the Lebanese army. On the phone now from Beirut is Jack Thompson. Jack, what can you tell me about it?
Well, I can tell you that it's going to be another sleepless night in Beirut because shells and grenades are exploding all over the city as I speak to you. The Lebanese army is, we hear, trying to gain control over Muslim West Beirut, and Druze and other militias continue to bombard southern sectors of the city near the airport. So we've got, as they say, an ongoing situation, and a spokesman for the British contingent attached to the International Peacekeeping Force here told me a short while ago that artillery rounds had been passing over their heads, apparently fired from Druze positions up in the Shuv Hills behind the airport.
There's been continuous concern that this may mark the beginning of renewed civil war.
Well, I think we've got civil war in all but name here in Lebanon, quite frankly. The leader of the Muslim Shiites, Mr. Nabi Berri, went on state-run radio tonight to order his men off the streets in the cause of national stability, as he put it. But so far, frankly, there's little sign that his orders have made much effect or made much difference to the chaos and violence.
Who ordered the Lebanese army in tonight?
The government ordered the Lebanese army, President Jamal and his ministers. I think one surprise here is that the government is even still in existence, but it's hanging on, I suppose, because if it resigns, then the Christian phalange will certainly decide to take matters into their own hands.
Is there any evidence that the American peacekeeping force have become involved in this latest outbreak?
Not today. We did have reports that American forces had landed on the northern shore here in Beirut from the 6th Fleet, but I think those reports were false. What appears to have happened is that indeed Lebanese army units decided to come round by sea and use the shore to attack the Druze in West Beirut.
Jack Thompson in Beirut, thank you very much indeed for coming on to us. Look after yourself for the rest of tonight.
Thank you. Good
Thank
night.
you. Good night. Well, a quick look now at tomorrow's weather. The central and eastern parts of England will be mostly dry with sunny periods. In Wales, western England and eastern Scotland, it will become cloudy later with rain in places. In Northern Ireland and western Scotland, there'll be outbreaks of rain throughout the afternoon and evening. Temperatures similar to today's. Now a look at tomorrow's papers. I have here the Financial Times leads on Begin rejecting pleas to stay on. And oil exploration, they say here, is at peak levels. Times again leads on Begin's decision to quit as leader. Sun, I was branded a beast of Brighton, they lead on. And the Daily Mail, US Marines shoot back. Well, that concludes our coverage for tonight. We'll be back again tomorrow night at 11 o'clock. Until then, from Gavin, myself, and David Sells, and everybody, good night.
Well, there's the last in the series with Magnus Magnusson tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, Vikings, and the complex skein of intrigue surrounding the Battle of Hastings. followed at 7:30 by Rocky Circus. Pop star Gary Glitter is the centre of attention of Jerry Cottle, who plans to build a circus around his mixture of high camp and deafening rock. In Chronicle Over Egypt at 8:15, we find out how a computer has rediscovered the nature and shape of a 3,000-year-old temple complex and the status and importance of Queen Nefertiti, followed at 9 o'clock by the final part of the melodrama East Lynne. Good Time George Melly is back on stage at 10 o'clock with his special guest, the legendary piano player and vocalist Memphis Slim. And at 10:30 there are more highlights from the Wembley Arena and this year's International Festival of Country Music, Sing Country. And then at 11 o'clock there's a Newsnight again to bring the evening to a close. And we close this evening with another painting. Well, in fact, two paintings tonight from the exhibition now on at the Tate Gallery. It's an exhibition which has been organised jointly by the BBC Woman's Hour, Radio Times and the Tate, and it's open this week from 10 in the morning until 5:50 in the afternoon, and on Sunday, and that's the final day, it's open from 2 o'clock until 5:50, and admission is free. Well, the first painting, which you can see now, is called Pink Flowers, and it's by Curran Pierre of London, N10, and the second painting is called Woman at a Table, and it's by Frida A. Isles of Grimsby, South Humberside. And the music you'll hear